Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I hope you are doing well. Today, I took the entire day off and it was fantastic. I got a pumpkin spice latte. I walked the dogs. I did a ton of laundry and I decorated our house for fall, which is one of my favorite things to do since fall is my very favorite season. And one of the things that I've really been thinking a lot about this week is the grace of God that overcomes and redeems our imperfections. And I read this devotion today, and it just really hit where I am in my own faith journey. One of my life verses, especially for ministry, and I would say especially for ministry in the midst of a pandemic, is 2 Corinthians 12:9. And 2 Corinthians 12:9 says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power has been made perfect in weakness." My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect or perfected in weakness. There's a devotion that I read this morning, a devotional on this particular passage from one of the writers of She Reads Truth, and I wanted to share it with you today because it's what I did and what I read during my quiet time with Jesus on my day off. I feel like it's going to really resonate with all of you, just like it's resonated with me. This is sufficient grace. It was just a common cold, then an infection, then another infection from the antibiotics the doctors had given me to fight the first infection. Then after being in bed for a week, my lower back started to hurt. To add insult to injury, I cracked one of my molars on a seed in my bread, and I ended up having to get a root canal. For 4 weeks, it was one thing after another. I don't get sick often. So for this debilitating month was like an object lesson in the absolute fragility of my body. Nothing was really related to anything else. It was just a perfect cluster of unfortunate events, all smashed up against one another. I don't know about you, but I can manage a simple cold. I can even manage a tweak back. But when all the world seems to conspire against me, when I simply get out of bed, eat anything harder than yogurt, or I'm in my 3rd round of antibiotics in just 1 month, well, that's when I begin to despair. In that moment, I couldn't remember what it felt like to be well, let alone remember what it felt like to be cheerful or whole or able to manage anything. I felt like a walking mistake. Have you ever felt like that? Maybe it's not physical for you, maybe it's emotional, or maybe it's physical, but to an extent that makes my month of horrible instances seem like a walk in the park. Perhaps it's mental or spiritual, I don't know. But I do know that sometimes God's grace does not feel sufficient for our weakness. Nothing about me or him, for that matter, seems sufficient in days and weeks and months like these. Yet in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul lists the weaknesses in which he finds contentment: insults, hardships, persecution, and calamities, not to mention a thorn in his flesh that hasn't been removed by God. Paul is not saying these things don't exist or that they aren't hard. He isn't putting on a brave face or being courageous in the midst of difficulty. He's not even saying it's okay to simply accept the thorn as it is. Instead, he begs God to remove it. But in the midst of all of this very real pain and difficulty, Paul's contentment is not in his ability to weather the storm, bear the pain, or be brave. His contentment is in the sufficiency of God's grace. When I am struggling with anything, I want to find contentment in God's sovereign ability to change everything in an instant, to heal what is broken right now, to right what is wrong. What I don't want to be contented with is simply walking through the difficulty, be it physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, and the knowledge that His grace is sufficient, that He is bearing this with me, that He hears me. And even if He hasn't answered my prayer according to my wishes, He is still sufficient for me in my weakness, emptiness, pain, and sorrow. Paul's words to the Corinthians in this passage remind me that sometimes God doesn't change our circumstances, not even one bit. But God does change our hearts in the midst of everything, making us more like Him. Jesus' words to Paul and to the Corinthians are a promise to you and I as well. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness. So I pray God's blessings upon all of you this Friday. I hope that devotional by Lore Ferguson Wilbert resonated with you just like it did with me. And I will see you all on Sunday.